So for the recording, I will just say again an introduction here. So we are here with Isam Bitar, who is a Palestinian living in the UK, and he spent, as he said before, most of his youth and the young adult time in Israel, and he's been, I'm sorry, in Palestine, and he's been in and out many times, and I came to visit. He was part of our group for about a year, and a few months ago got frustrated from the discussion and decided to leave. And the objective of tonight is to talk to him, to understand from him what was the reason for the frustration and what can be done to improve the discussion in the group, so people like Isam can remain with us and others can join us. So with that, I also want to say hi to Moshe, who joined us. Moshe, where are you from? Where are you calling from today?
I'm at my home in the Western Galilee.
Okay. So, and Vasily, you are in Greece? Vasily, are you in Greece now?
Hi, Maurice. Sorry, yes. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm in Greece.
Okay. And Jerome, where are you calling from, Jerome? So just want to say that we have here a representation of so many countries. It's nice to see. So we have Canada, Eric is in Canada, Isam in the UK, Vasily in Greece, Joseph in the US on the West Coast, Montana on the East Coast of the US, Kai from the UAE, Jerome, I don't know, where are you calling from? You're muted. Warda is in Italy now.
Santa Barbara, California.
Santa Barbara, California. Gidon in Jerusalem, and Diane and myself in the north part of Israel. So it's a really nice combination of location. Okay, so with that, let's go back to Isam's discussion. And Isam, yeah, I would love to hear from you more specifically. What are the issues? What were the issues that kind of made you so frustrated that you really at one point shared with us that you see no hope anymore? Please.
Yeah, so thanks again, Maury. In short, so I spent about a year with you guys, and I've noticed that there is a lot of really good work going on there. There's a lot of groundwork that's being covered. And unfortunately, my feeling and also my conclusion from the time and experience I've spent in this group is that there is a bit of a jumping the gun, so to speak, with what is being done at the moment. I feel that there is a lot of trying to get to peace, or to try to broker or to create an environment of peace without addressing the reasons behind there being no peace up until this moment. So I think it's no secret that our conflict is probably one of the longest living modern conflicts in history, and there is a reason for that. Palestinians get a lot of grief from both Israelis and outside observers telling us that you need to move on and you need to get over this. You can't keep being at war. You can't keep being enemies of Israel, etc. Putting the onus on us to start the reconciliation process. Now, normally I would agree with that. The problem is you can't start healing if your wounds are constantly being bled. And this is where the main issue is, and why I felt that it's just not the right time for me to be part of this group, because the group tries to reach peace by jumping over all of the prerequisites that are needed to achieve peace. In my opinion, peace is not something that you aim for per se, but rather it is a natural consequence that you will get if you achieve the prerequisites for peace. You can't get to the other side of the brook without wading through the mud first. And I feel there is at least when I was part of the group, there was a general aversion to getting people's feet in the mud. And that is the biggest issue that I see, not just in your group, Maury, but in general, and in most grassroots peace movements, this seems to be the case as well. They just try to say the past is the past, put everything behind us, let's reconcile, let's live together, or let's live separately but be friends, whatever the vision of peace is for that particular grassroots movement. But they never seem to address the issues. The main issue is, why haven't we had peace for 75 plus years? And I think this is a difficult question that, at least in my opinion, as a Palestinian, and of course I am slightly biased in being Palestinian, but in my opinion, I feel many Israelis aren't comfortable in addressing that question. The real question, the fundamental question, why have we not had peace for 75 years? And that's why I left the group. As I see things right now, I see two nations who are kind of destined to be enemies for eternity. As you know, the way things are going and the way things are leading, and that we have differences that are irreconcilable, especially when it comes to narratives, especially when it comes to what we believe about ourselves and about the other. We can cover great groundwork in getting individuals and people to sit together and talk and get to know each other. But I don't think that's enough. And I don't think we have the prerequisites to start that kind of conversation.
Okay, first, thank you for that. I want to first correct you on one thing. You kept saying Maury's group. It's not my group. First, Warda and I together, we manage it, but it's our group all together. And all the members here it's our group. I'm just trying to facilitate it together with Warda. Yeah, Moshe, please.
Thank you. And I would say that you're doing a very good job in moderating, both of you. And I appreciate Isam being straightforward with us and explaining the issues. And I totally understand and agree, but I would try to correct your view of things in a way, because I think what you're not looking at is you can't see our feet here in these Zoom chats. Our feet are in the mud. We are here. This group is in the mud. We're neither academics who are actually studying college courses and doing, excuse me, majors in Middle East history, nor are we politicians, nor are we negotiating partners or representatives of any one country or another. This is the mud. This is the actual trying to be able to learn about each other, about, for instance, your reservations and your feelings, which are totally legitimate, as are those of anybody else here, including, I think it's Kai's son. Kai, is that your son? Hi. Anyway, I think that this is the important walking through the mud stuff. And today we have only 12 people that I see here. Sometimes we have even 40 people here. And the more we talk to each other in this way, and the more people like you bring up your issues, which are absolutely justified, is really the groundwork that will be helping others who are not as educated or knowledgeable about the conflict and its history to go out and learn more about it, and also to be able to help us here, wherever we are, to get our leaders to help make progress toward that eventual end of the conflict. But again, you're right in that we have to march through the mud. Even if our leaders do go ahead and say tomorrow, Lapid says, I want to go have coffee with Abu Mazen, and Abu Mazen says yes, and they sit down for a month and they sign all the papers and an agreement is done. That will not be the peace. That is the paperwork for peace. But the real peace happens right here between all of us. And it's not only those of us living in Palestine or in Israel, but everywhere in the world who need to support us. So I think that we're on the right track. I would appreciate and encourage you to stay with us and express your views. Not everything that everybody says here I would agree with, and I would assume that not everyone would agree with everything I say. In fact, I'll be sure about that. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be said. This is the real stuff. And there are very few frameworks that you can actually afford to do this kind of thing, because otherwise we'd have to get on either airplanes or buses or cars and get together, and it's a very difficult situation. Here is a real trenching through the mud experience, and I'm glad you're talking about it, and I hope you will come back and stay with us and help us get through the mud.
Thank you, Moshe.
Thank you, Moshe. I want to say, I think one of the problems that is associated with the name of the group is that almost everybody views himself or herself as for peace. And so you have in our group people that for them, peace means you Palestinian can continue to live as a second or third class citizens in small Bantustans, but let's live in peace. Let's live in peace. Let's not fight. So some people, this is their view of peace, and it's very frustrating to have discussion with these people. I definitely agree. We did put some clear guidelines in our group what peace means. Peace means equality, peace means freedom, peace means a fair solution that the majority of people on both sides agree to. But not everybody really, follow that. And I can tell you that, we have 4,700 members in the group now, but we had to block a lot of people. We blocked more than 100, and I say more than 100 because Facebook doesn't give you the number above 100. So I know that it's more than 100, but probably a lot more than 100. And many left because we suspended them and didn't let them communicate. So even with that, when we do that, we still have quite a few people there that are not truly peaceful and but they don't always are easy to spot. So that's kind of a bit of a challenge that we have. Gideon, you had your hand raised, please.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Mori, for bringing Isam this evening, and thank you, Isam, for agreeing. I've truly missed you all these months here. Now,
likewise.
I want to analyze the group that we're in is all right, I'm sorry, I often get lost with languages. Tamtzit, what do you call that? The essence of the problem. Look at the writing of the Jews, and I'm going to tell it from the point of a post-Zionist Jew that still believes that we should live here, and this is part of my stuff. I'm full of contradictions like everybody else. We came here a long time ago, in the beginning of the conflict, and there were men in black, and then some others came, and so forth. The fact is the men in black were a completely different story. The Jews that came later, the Biluim or the second Aliyah, and all these things happened. Those people came here with total lack of ability to see that we were hurting Palestinians. Not because they were evil, but because they were for generations tortured. That's our situation. That's not an excuse, yeah? And I keep on repeating it for the Jews. I do expect Palestinians to take the lead and say their mistakes. I'm not conditioning what I say on them, but I have to restate it again and again, because I know when my language is very often in a, you know what? Sometimes I say, well, you know, it's not that I'm on a different page. I'm in a different book. The book is on a different shelf. The shelf is in a different library, right? Right? And so forth. But I know that some people get it, and somehow I think I'm getting more clear. But that's it. I see lots of Jews that cannot accept the possibility a Jew did anything wrong. Well, they'll either get weeded out or they'll weed themselves in, hopefully. And I think a few people have changed over time. It's a long trek, and I would end this, what I have to say, from a song that Pete Seeger ended, take it easy, but take it.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's good.
Isam, you mentioned a prerequisite that you think the group should have before it moves on to what they do today. What did you mean by that?
So obviously, I don't mean just this group, but I mean the peace camp as a whole. So everybody who's involved in peace and wants peace, as you've said earlier, everybody who's not a psychopath wants peace. However, how we get to that peace is different for every person. And that is the issue. You can reach peace in a many number of ways. You could force peace if you really want to. But if you want a lasting peace, if you want a peace that will last generations, that will be self-sustaining, you need it to be built on a solid foundation. Now, this is my opinion, and of course, many of you here have many more years of experience than I do in this, and many more years of education than I do in this as well. So do feel free to correct me or to qualify what I say. But I think that foundation is a foundation of justice. Unless Palestinians as a whole get justice, now what that looks like is, again, different for different Palestinians. You've got different schools of thought in the Palestinian community of what justice means. But there is a mainstream and there is a reasonable expectation of what justice means. And there is a fundamental framework of justice that we operate on worldwide. And that means things such as freedom of movement, freedom of expression, freedom to self-determine, and the different human and civil rights, and a feeling of equality, and a feeling of I'm trying to find the correct word here, but let's call it closure. Okay, so unless you get these things or work towards these things, or at the very least recognize that these are things that are missing and need to be realized, I think it would be too early to talk about and try to push for peace. And in my opinion, this is why the different peace initiatives have failed. And this is why, now I'm sure there are other ulterior motives. After all, let me backtrack. So I'm sure, so I know that this is one of the, I'm sure this is one of the reasons why the Palestinian leadership has rejected the different deals that have been put on the table, is that none of these deals were founded on a foundation of justice, not even remotely so. Now, I'm fully aware that most of the Palestinian leaders are corrupt and they probably had ulterior motives, but to an average Palestinian who also rejected these peace initiatives, after all, you won't see a large proportion of Palestinians who went to these leaders and said, "Oh, you should have accepted that." There is a general consensus in the Palestinian nation that none of these would have been acceptable, and the reason for that is that none of them are built on a foundation of justice, and justice being defined in the way that I explained earlier. And I think this is what is missing and what is fundamentally missing from the discourse and from from any talk of peace and resolution at this day and time.
Mm. So, Isam, I want to maybe try to separate two different topics of discussion. One is that I'm hearing from you talking a lot about what should be the solution, what peace looks like, etc., and this type of thing. And the other one, which in my mind is very different, is the discussion in the group, okay? The dynamics in the group, because when I started this group, I did start it myself, but then many people joined me. The idea was not that everybody will reach a common solution or a common concept of what peace is like, etc., and we'll work with that. That was not the objective, because I don't think it's achievable. In a small group, it is, but not in a large group. The objective was for people to listen to other ideas, to share their own ideas, to have a discussion, to learn, hopefully to learn something from it, and hopefully to connect to a certain degree better, because you can personalize the other side. And that was, for me, the objective. Now, honestly, I was hoping for more these type of discussions, meaning more Zoom type of discussions, face-to-face, and not only Facebook discussions. But it turned out that, again, out of the many thousands of people that are active, we have about 3,000 people active on the group every month, which is a lot, by the way, much more than any other peace group on Facebook. Out of the 3,000, only, as you can see tonight, we have 13 people, sometimes we get 40, but that's a lot, are coming to those Zoom meetings. So the question is, how do we keep the discussion such that, people can communicate, can understand each other, can relate to each other, can feel belong? That would be a more important topic for discussion, honestly, than talking about this solution versus the other solution at this point of time. Because also, honestly, I don't think we are decision makers, right? So I think a grassroots movement like us should be big enough, if it ever will become big enough. The objective will be to tell the leaders, we have a lot of Israelis and a lot of Palestinians all asking you guys to find a solution for peace. We are not going to provide you the solution. You're going to find a solution, but we want to live in peace, and peace is possible. So that would be my goal. But Isam, I want to throw the ball back to you and ask you more to focus more on the dynamics of the discussion and less on the solution itself, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah. So I wasn't really referring to a solution of any sort. Now, even I myself, I'm not convinced one way or another of what a peace process or even a peace solution will look like. To me, this is secondary to a primary cause, which is to achieve the prerequisites that I talked about. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what the end solution looks like, whether you believe in a single state, two states, three states, two states with, you know, a federation, whatever it is that you think. None of these would work unless they were built on the foundation of the things that I discussed. And I've just seen that Moshe put something in the chat. I couldn't read the entire thing. I apologize, but from the pop-up that showed, you said something about reconciliation being a prerequisite for justice, and I do agree. You do need some form of reconciliation to achieve that. But when you consider the dynamics, especially the power dynamics in this particular conflict, there is very little room for both sides to start a reconciliation process. I think there is a huge power imbalance here where one side completely controls the other and thus completely subjugates them. And that's where it needs to start. Palestinians can say that they want reconciliation, that they want to do something about it, but it won't go anywhere because they do not have the power. We don't have the power to influence anything or to do anything. We've had a president that has vowed pacifism for the past, what is it now, 18 years, I think?
I think so, yeah.
It's got us nowhere whatsoever. And so in this kind of environment and in the kind of dynamic that we have right now, I feel like there needs to be a lot more work on the side that has a lot more power. At least that is my opinion. All that we can do as Palestinians is try to push for that to happen. And this is ultimately my form of trying to achieve peace, which is to try to trigger these conversations, to ask these difficult questions, to make people uncomfortable, and to try to get these topics talked about.
Thank you. Joseph?
All right, thank you, Maury. I feel very, very strongly that Isam represents my point of view too. I'm not sure that I feel that he is representing what I want to say about this group and about in general. I think that I don't want to be too blunt, but I am. I feel that this group and saying that you want peace is not enough. I suggested a long time ago in this group that we speak about, in an honest way, about what is the cause of this conflict. You cannot deal with lung cancer in isolation. You have to look at what causes lung cancer. So to go to a patient with lung cancer and say, we wish you to be happy and healthy, and we wish your surgery to be successful, is not enough. You need to talk about the cause of lung cancer. In my opinion, I suggested that many, many times. I think that the Zionists are responsible for this conflict, for this violence, by politicizing religion. And they politicize religion starting in the 18th century, and then the 19th century, and then by Israel. And the politicization of religion started this conflict. Ignoring the Palestinians was part of the politicization the outcome of the politicization of religion. And whenever I bring that, I'm sure it's going to be the same way today. It's no discussion about the cause of the conflict. I may be wrong, but there is no discussion about the cause. So what we have here is a group of nice people who say, well, let's make peace, but let's not talk about what caused the peace and what the peace is going to look like. Let's not talk about, Isam was talking about justice to the Palestinian, and we ignored him. What is the justice? Why do they? What kind of justice they want? How to get there? And I hear a lot here about let's go talk to our leaders to make peace. The leaders, in my opinion, are the cause of the peace. We are the conflict. It's like going to a cigarette manufacturer and tell them, hey, could you make better cigarettes? That's going to our leaders. I feel that we do not have an honest, true discussion. And I feel very frustrated, the same as Isam, about the cause of the conflict, the true cause of the conflict, and how to get to a just solution for the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Thank you. I actually wanted to comment on that because, first, we do have some discussions in the group about the history and who started, when started, how it started. We do have this kind of discussion, but I want to say that I personally try to avoid it for the most part, because when you focus on looking in the mirror, you don't see what's coming ahead of you, and you're not you cannot change the past, you can change the future. And the past is very bad anyways. And so with the lung cancer analogy, okay, you smoked for 40 years, that's why you have the cancer now. What can you do about it now? You can only feel sorry that you did it. Now let's have a surgery and remove the cancer and try to live healthy going on forward. That would be the analogy.
No, I'm sorry. The analogy is go on, continue to smoke. There is nothing wrong with smoking.
We realize.
Look, Maury, you cannot,
Joseph,
this is my
Joseph,
perception.
Because again, Joseph, I'm against continuous smoking, okay? Continuous smoking is.
But you don't say that in this group. You don't say that smoking causes cancer. You just say, no, you do not. You just do say,
the reason is that your solution, the way that the solution that you are defining is so.
Forget about my solution.
If I forget about your solution, then I would say that any solution, either your solution or a two-state solution or a confederation or a federation, would actually bring us much closer to a fair peace and justice that Isam is talking about, relative to what we have today. And what we are saying is that
I disagree. I disagree. I do not believe you.
That's in my opinion. In my
opinion, you cannot reach a solution. You cannot reach unless you understand the cause of the problem. And this group is refusing to talk about the cause of the problem because
we don't refuse.
Well, you just said
we just said that it's not the focus. Our focus is on the things that we can change and not in the past, but we have a lot of discussions about the past. Joseph, I would like to give Vasily also a chance to talk. Go ahead, Vasily, please.
Hi, everyone. I just want to make an observation. So we basically said that Isam said, we're not getting into the mud. and Moshe said that we are in the mud. And the thing is this, that both are right, you know. And I think the thing is, you know, so if we look at it from, so I'm making the assumption from Moshe's perspective, you know, everyone that's in this group and all Israelis in this group are putting up a big fight and going against the grain, so to speak, in what, in general terms, would be amongst the Israeli society and the Israeli community. For you to be having these kind of discussions and dialogues is challenging. And, you know, you
I lost him. Did you lose him again also?
Yeah, I can't hear what you're saying, but the line went.
Vasily, we lost you for maybe 20 seconds. No, doesn't work. We can't hear you.
You are still lost.
Sorry.
Thanks, Vasily. Maybe just type it out in the chat, and then we can.
Yeah,
read
if you
through
can
that.
type it in the chat. But Isam, I want to go back to you. You know, we had a few rounds of discussions here. Maybe you want to add something or to comment.
I mean, yeah, it was a pretty interesting discussion that just took place, and I do agree with Joseph on the fact that there needs to be more talk about the cause of the conflict. So I just want to go back to the smoking analogy, right? Okay, so you agree that we need to stop smoking, right? But I don't think that's enough, right? Smoking is still a symptom of something else. Why are you smoking? It's because you have an addiction. Why did you develop this addiction? It's because you had environmental and maybe genetic factors that made you susceptible to substance abuse. And that's what needs to be addressed. When you enter rehabilitation for substance abuse, this is what they work on. You could try quitting smoking. It might work, but in all likelihoods, if you've been an addicted smoker for 40 years, you're not going to be able to just quit. Most people who smoke well into their silver years know very well what they're doing to themselves. They just can't stop it. And that's what I mean when I say we need to address the underlying issues. And I like to bring up a real example rather than just an analogy. The Palestinians of Israel, right? They're made of the same blood as we are. They face the same things that we did. They were displaced. They had all the same grievances we did, and they were violent towards the state of Israel for a very long time, until the 1960s, when military law was lifted off them, and they were granted citizenship, and they were given, at least on paper, equal rights. And this is when the violence from the Palestinians of Israel basically dissipated into nothing. It still happens every now and then, but when you consider the magnitude of the violence that comes from Palestinians and Palestinian Israelis, there's no parity. There's no, you know, the scales are tipped very heavily in one direction. And I don't think many people talk about why that is the case. And I think if we can see what's different between those two communities, what has been done to one community versus the other, okay, we can establish the prerequisites for peace. There's still a lot of groundwork to cover to you know, fully and completely make peace and you know, live in a egalitarian community with the Palestinian Israelis. But there's a lot of groundwork already covered in there as well. And if you want to reach that stage with a remaining Palestinians, you've got to cover the similar groundwork. It doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to look the same. We don't need to become Israeli citizens like them. But it's the things that were brought forth by granting them citizenship, by putting them under civil law, by giving them equal rights, at least on paper. This is the stuff that needs to be covered first before we hope to achieve any form of lasting peace. So this is what I think. This is where the conversation is lacking, and I think this is what Joseph was referring to as well. We need to address the root causes, not just the secondary causes, not just the symptoms.
Okay, thank you. Vasily, are you able to talk now? Do you want to give it another try?
Yeah, thanks, Maury. I'm not going to restart the whole thing. I'm just going to, I guess, try to summarize, I guess, is, with Moshe saying about being in the mud.
Uh-oh.
Are you losing me again?
Oh, there you are. Go on.
You come and go. You come and go.
That's
You're
very strange. Let me. I guess the signal's bad. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, if you lose me again, then I'll just end. Can you hear me at the moment?
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying, Moshe is saying that we, in the mud, and I don't know if you heard the example of what I said is in society in Israel, from a community perspective, to be in these kind of discussions, there's a lot of pressure, I guess, trying to convince or speak to the Israeli community about these kind of conversations. So the people in this group are in the mud in that sense. So it's a hard fight to try and change, let's say, the trend towards where things are going. But from Isam's perspective, he says he doesn't feel we're in the mud. And I think the reason for that is, Maury, what you said about the issue is equality. So the fact that we don't have equality, that not only do we not have equality, but we've got oppression towards Palestinians and Israelis being in the, so to speak, comfortable position. This is why from the one side, it may feel that someone's in the mud, but the other one feels, well, we still. So when we have these conversations and we in this kind of dialogue, we are having this dialogue as equals, and we're sharing each other's views and opinions and exchanging thoughts of how we can find peace. But the problem is that there's the oppressed, and from I'm not referring to the individuals that are in this call, but in general, the Israelis are the oppressors. So, and again, please, I'm not speaking about the people in this group. I'm talking from a systemic perspective. So, and I think this is what the real difficulty is in most of these conversations, because the conversation is equal with good intentions, wanting to find peace, but the situation is that the one is the oppressed, and it's really a constant uphill battle, and with a real lack of light in these conversations, because we're coming in these conversations as equals, but we are not. We are not in the sense that the one is the oppressed. So I just think that's something to try and reflect on or understand or see or anyway, I just wanted to share that.
No, I agree with you. As a matter of fact, I was part of a peace conference, I can call it, of OLMEP, and the way they framed it, I thought it was a very interesting way. Is, instead of look at it as an effort for coexistence, as some people view it, it really should be an effort for co-resistance. So kind of, we have to realize, like, indeed there is an oppressed side, and the one that holds the privilege will probably not give it up voluntarily. Will probably not give it up voluntarily, and just like it was in the U.S. back in the independence days, not independence necessarily, but when the North fought
Civil
against
rights.
slavery, and later on it was the civil rights movement as well, and you had a lot of white people joining forces with black people to fight against the system. It sounds like we should be referring to it as such, and not kind of let's make peace between Israelis and Palestinians. I think this is a very good point. Thank you. Next, I have Gidon again. Gidon. Still muted, Gidon.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So number one, I used to call myself an anti-Zionist, but I heard Shir Hevel once from the AI, whatever it's called, AIC in the States on the Real News says, I consider myself a non-Zionist because I believe it could have turned out different. I'm willing to, that's as far as I can go. If when you tell people that it's the root of all evil, nobody wants to accept he was evil. It's real simple. You don't need an advanced degree in psychology. That's number one. Yeah. Most of the people that came here, that came to Israel, that at the time in 48, I do believe they were following the great Jewish philosopher Lenny Bruce, who said, haul ass to save ass. And you know it's okay because you saw Jackie Kennedy do it on CBS. That's that. They adopted the ideology that would save their lives. And once you do it, you buy into it 1,000%. Yeah, because that's the thing that saved you. Well, they can soften it up when they meet more Palestinians and more other people, and they can relate to them kind of decently. Yeah, that's it. That's it. And I apologize almost to every Palestinian that I meet, but I did. I remember a person that maybe some of you read his stuff, Isaac Deutscher. He was never in the fourth international, but he split Polish guy. You can find his stuff. He said basically that also. We made this state here because we had no choice. I'm sorry that we didn't have a choice, and so are you. Yeah, we should have done better. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Moshe.
Yeah, relating to the mud analogy, I didn't mean that the Israelis are in the mud for our position and resisting the general understanding in Israel. In fact, the Geneva Initiative poll just came out right before the Biden visit, and it says that 51% of Israelis support a two-state solution. That was meant to show that Biden, who is also in favor of a two-state solution, has the needed support for that kind of a solution here in Israel. But then in addition to that, consider the fact that there are a lot of people who are favoring a one-state solution. The fact that somebody's in favor of a solution is already a good thing. It doesn't really matter which one it is. So if we actually take all of the people who believe in a solution together, we're a large majority. Now, getting to that solution is another story. All of the details of it are also an intricate part of that story. But in going back to the question of having to understand all of the base, the source of our conflict is obviously important. I don't think anyone will disagree with that. Anyone who does probably doesn't understand it. And that's why they say it's not important to understand it. But let's take the American Native Indians, for example. I'd like to see a show of hands of anybody who thinks that the Indians, the Native Americans, were responsible for their situation. Nobody does. Everybody understands where the root of that problem was. Did that solve the issue for Native Americans? I haven't seen it happen. There has been progress, but obviously nothing really has been done in almost 500 years of obviously who was the problem. I mean, if it was only recognized in the last 200 years or 100 years even, that it was the Europeans who came to North America who were the problem. But now there's such a majority that no one's going to say, okay, well, we're going to leave then. You know, we agree it was our fault, so goodbye, we're out of here. Where are they going to go? They're not going anywhere. I'm not saying that our situation is similar. I'm not trying to justify an evil Zionism, such as the one we saw today, where the Israeli army, the Israeli police, and the military police stood on the side while thousands of settlers just circumvented their barricades and went up and created 7 new illegal outposts. If those had been Israeli Arab citizens, there would have been shots fired in the air. They would not have been able to walk around. In other words, there are real issues here for sure. And I totally agree with Isam and with Joseph's understanding that most of the real work has to be done on our side. But what I'm trying to get across is that it's not just a matter of understanding and discussing the roots of the problem. Let's say that everybody agrees we are the problem. Everybody in Israel all of a sudden comes to an epiphany and they say, you know what? It was our fault. The question is now, what do we do? Because I would love to be able to get all those people to have that understanding of the real source, the essence of why we are where we are. But what's important to me is the being a person who's trying to say, look, we're not leaving, they're not leaving. It doesn't matter who's we and they. Now, what do we do? How do we learn to not have violence against each other? How do we learn to actually appreciate each other, even become friends with you? Now, this is not a prerequisite. We don't have to be lovey-dovey's and hugging each other, but to be able to understand the problems of the other that's already a big step forward. I think that only the people who can understand that the other is no less and no more than oneself can they actually make progress towards some sort of a solution. There's no real desire to solve the problems, the affliction, the issues of the occupation and the lack of democracy and the lack of a future of one's self-determination for Palestinians if they don't think that they deserve one. If you're a religious Jew who believes that God gave us this and that's all there is to it, everybody else can just go fuck themselves. That's not going to help. If you understand and you say that it belongs to us, but okay, if it belongs to us, that doesn't mean it has to be at the expense of someone else. That's already a step forward. But if you go even further and say it isn't necessarily God or anybody else, it's up to me to make sure that everything that I do does not hurt anybody. That has to be like the first commandment. Don't hurt anybody. So what I'm saying is that we've already long past the Geneva Initiative. In 2003, the Geneva Initiative final status agreement was made where we discussed all of these things. We've actually come to agreements between Palestinians and Israelis. You can argue whether those negotiating teams were fair or proper or whatever, but there was a Palestinian negotiating group who negotiated as if it were in the name of a Palestinian people, an Israeli group of negotiators who negotiated in the name of Israelis, and they came to agreements on almost every single issue. I'm not saying it's a perfect agreement. I'm not saying that we should be adopting it and it only in the next few days, but if we were to use that agreement as a roadmap between two sides, whoever comes to the table, and I think that it should be a representative group of Palestinians, not just of the Palestinian Authority, but everybody should be able to come to the table and say, look, we can't have this. We do agree. We disagree. And get down to the final line where you just say, okay, I can't give up any more on my side. I'm ready to sign. Can you give up any more on your side? When you get to the point where nobody can give up any more, but they're both satisfied with the possibility of this creating the drying up of the mud so that we can now actually make a real agreement, let's do it. And in my opinion, it is an actual possibility. But there, obviously, we still have a lot of work to do. So I'm not saying we shouldn't understand the past. We should. I think that in these discussions, I think it is less important unless I want to say, look, I went to Beirut. I was a soldier in Beirut. I feel horrible about that. And I refused after the second time that I went to Lebanon. I refused to go the third time to Lebanon. If I can admit all of the things I've done wrong, I don't know where that's going to get us necessarily, because I'm already there. I already understand what I've done that was wrong and what needs to be done to make it right. I think we should be spending more of our time on find that commonality where we can actually get through the mud together and start looking up and finding the way that we can actually look at a future for all of our children and grandchildren, and have a place where we can actually come and visit each other without walls, without borders, without hatred. I think we have to work on that, not among us, because if we're already here, we've gone a long way. It's the people who aren't here that we have to be talking to.
Thank you for that.
I would like to respond to Moshe, if you don't mind, Maury.
Sure, okay.
Moshe is saying, yeah, it's a good idea to learn about the cause of the conflict. But even if we learn what the cause of the conflict, what are we going to do with that information? How is that going to lead us anywhere? The implication of what you're saying is, let's have a solution without understanding the problem. Well, because you are not advocating for learning deep what the solution is. If we learn what this, and then you mentioned that there was an agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. It could be that if you learn the solution, the problem, you don't really need an agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It could be that you don't really need to have the Israelis on one side and the Palestinians on the other side. It could be that the people that are negotiating for the solution are really the problem, not the solution. In other words, dismissing the idea of learning about the problem deep to the root, as Isam said so beautifully, then you learn that the solutions could come in many, many shapes, many forms, but you seem to be identified with a solution that we have to reach. And you said we already reached a solution. And you said that even if all Israelis...
I'd love it. Bring more solutions.
Okay.
I'm not saying we should ignore.
I brought a solution. What's wrong with the solution that I brought?
Excellent. Let's work on it.
Okay. Well,
there are a number of solutions. I'm not saying that there's only one, and I'm not saying we shouldn't look at that.
I'm not advocating here for my solution. I'm advocating for learning honestly, deep, what the problem is. I think my point is, I said it's the politicization of religion, and it is racism by Jews against Palestinians. If we admit that it is racism, if we admit that, then why do we need to negotiate? Why can't we just have one country for all of us in a democracy and not have Israelis and Palestinians negotiating for borders? If we admit that the problem is racism, if we admit that the problem is the politicization of religion, why do we need to negotiate an agreement?
I agree with you that if we could, let's say, remove the issues. By the way, there are multiple issues for a one-state solution. Ideally, for me, as a person who is also a US citizen like you, I really like the concept of a democratic state. You know, everybody is equal, separation of state and religion. I really love that concept, but I think we have to, again, when we talk about identifying the issues, not just the root cause from the past, but really the current root cause. I think the issues are that on one hand, Jews are a nation in trauma, let's call it this way, are a nation in trauma, that they are afraid of becoming another, again, a minority in a country that they live in. And they are afraid to be persecuted because of that, again, or be discriminated at. And they feel that, Jews feel that, you know, the Zionist concept with all its issues was a good one. So that's on the Jewish side. On the Palestinian side, I think that again, my feeling is that it's very hard to forgive to people who oppressed you for so many years so badly, to all of a sudden forget and forgive, and let's live as nothing happened before, and be friends.
Absolutely, I agree
and
with
I
you.
think these are the two reasons why reaching a one-state solution that is really functioning peacefully is going to be very hard. Again, in Yugoslavia, for example, they tried to do it and it didn't work, and they separated because of that afterwards. There are multiple examples of places where they try to combine different nations with different and with the past of fighting together, and it didn't work. So again, in my opinion, a two-state solution is not ideal. There are issues with that as well. You know, a Palestinian who grew up in the Galilee may want to go back to the Galilee. He doesn't want to live in Ramallah.
But Maury, I'm very sorry to tell you, you're an American citizen. You swore allegiance to the American Constitution. You accept the concept of separation between church and state. You accept the concept of an American Constitution.
Yeah,
that,
I would prefer that.
okay,
yeah.
So why are you bringing the example of Yugoslavia rather than the country that you swore allegiance to?
No, but again, I'm giving you, because we have, again, the separation of state and religion can happen also in Israel, regardless of the Palestinian issue. But
No, it cannot.
I wish it would happen. No, it could. But
no,
I wish
because that ends the Jewish state.
I'm sorry?
That ends the Jew. If you separate between church and state in Israel, then that means that anybody can marry anyone. That you don't have to have Jewish marriage. You don't have to have immigration based on religion, and that is the destruction of the Jewish state.
No, I don't think it's.
Well, you can say no, but you keep it as a Jewish state for that reason.
No, but Jewish state, Joseph, you should probably know that, but maybe some people don't. Jewish state does not mean religious Jew. It means Jewish people. So I'm a full atheist. Okay, I don't believe in God.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what.
I'm not related
it doesn't matter what you believe or you don't believe. It matters what the government thinks of you, and what the government thinks of someone else. So a Jewish state is defined by the government, not by you. You can secretly believe
but the
in
Jewish
Jesus
state,
Christ. They don't care.
but the
And
Jewish
it's the
state,
government. It's the government that decide that you are of a certain appearance,
yes.
of a certain last name, and you're Jewish. They don't really care if you. That's what it's about.
No,
And
Joseph,
why are they not bringing the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and declaring them as Jewish and get it over with?
No, Joseph.
Just like they
Joseph.
declared the people from New York or from Russia. They
Joseph,
declared them
I'm
as
surprised.
Jewish and they brought them over. Why not declare the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza as Jewish?
Joseph,
that's it. Get it over with.
You are confusing different things. They define who is Jew not based on the religion. They don't check if you pray or if you go to synagogue. They check who is your mother, and that's how they check if you are a Jew or not. So
the Palestinians and the Jews came from the same father, the same mother. So they check and they'll find that, and they can solve the conflict in one day. They'll check and say, "Hey, they don't check. They didn't check who my mother's mother is. They say they do, but they don't. There is no registry of mothers. This is all nonsense. There is no registry of mothers in the Jewish. It's all just created concept. And they could create a new concept and say, hey, we found that all the Palestinians are from the same mother as we are. They're all Jews. They can pray to whoever they want and get it over with. The reason they don't do it is because they're racist. It's racism.
Okay. Isam, you are our special guest and you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Thanks, Maury. I just wanted to respond to Joseph's idea about making peace now. So you're saying if you know there doesn't need to be a negotiations, it doesn't need to be teams of negotiators, etc. That can just happen. You can have a one state, you can have a peace immediately. So Maury's aptly provided his own qualification to that by saying that there is a lot of tensions that will not simply go away overnight, but also I think, and this is very important, and it's also missing from a lot of especially Israeli initiatives for peace, which is Palestinian agency. Now, yes, and I did say, and I still believe, the bulk of the work is on the shoulders of Israel because they have the bulk of the power. But Palestinians maintain agency over themselves. It's a fundamental part of self-determination. The Palestinians need to be given an opinion and a say about whatever solution Israel is willing to provide or implement. There was this federation solution that Emmanuel Shahaf talks about. And one thing that was missing, glaringly missing from his proposal, and I challenged him on it, it's Palestinian agency. He says, oh, we'll just impose this on the Palestinians and it will work. It doesn't work like that, because one of the main reasons we're in this fight is because we don't have a say, right? So we still need to have those negotiations. We still need to have teams of representatives. Now, hopefully by that time, we'll be able to provide better representatives than the one we have now, people who are actually representative, and we'd be able to have a say. At the very least, if Israel wants to circumvent the Palestinian leadership, and I can see a million reasons why they would want to do that, and I probably agree with 99% of them. At the very least, there needs to be a national referendum where Palestinians are given a say. Would you like to do this, or would you prefer something else? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or however many possible resolutions and then kind of pick your first, second, and third favorite. There needs to be a conversation. It can't be something that's implemented from the top. That worked with a tiny minority that was Palestinians of Israel, because at that time their Palestinian nationality and peoplehood was not as fully formed and mature as the Palestinian nationality and peoplehood of the Palestinians in Palestine is. You can't use the same formula because it won't work. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay. What about the people who didn't speak yet, like Montana, Diane, Kai? Do you want to say something?
Well, actually, I have a question. One of the things that worries me is there's no up and coming leaders on either side that the people will feel they can trust to make peace, but especially on the Palestinian side. So is there somebody you see that would be an up and coming leader that will take over, that can be voted in, that the Palestinian people have enough confidence in to support peace? I would say the same on the Israeli side, but I'm curious from your side.
So the key word there is voted in. Unfortunately, we have a very, very, very broken democratic system. It's essentially non-functional. We have a schism in the political landscape. Obviously, you have Hamas, who went rogue and became their own thing and started being a terrorist organization on one side. And then you have the PLO, which is basically consolidated all the power and is refusing to allow any democratic process, any national democratic process to take on. So there is lots of local elections that take place all over Palestine, and they're very successful and they're very effective. But on the national level, that's really stopped since since the schism happened, and it doesn't seem like it's going to come back. There is talks about when Mahmoud Abbas eventually either dies or abdicates, that Israel will work with the PLO to bring in Mohammed Dahlan from the top and impose him on the Palestinian people. Now, whether the Palestinian people will say something about this, I don't know, unlikely. But again, it's this imposition. So in terms of voting somebody in, we tried to have an election in May 2021. It didn't work out. There's all kinds of excuses why that didn't go through. To keep the answer short, I don't know if in the foreseeable future there will be a leadership with a proper mandate who would be able to do something like this. Now, on the other side, Israel could try to enable that by supporting the current regime a little bit less. Now, I know they like to support them because they keep things running, and that's in the benefit of Israel. But maybe there needs to be a bit of a change in that dynamic. Unfortunately, it's very hard for Palestinians to overthrow the current establishment because for 2 reasons. First of all, Israel supports it, fully supports it, fully behind it. And 2, which is an even harder thing to address, is that, well, the PLO is made of the people, right? And whilst it's a minority of people, it is a substantial minority. And it's people that Yasser Arafat, back when he was around, he would provide these employment opportunities for those who are from more deprived backgrounds, etc. Kind of create this kind of egalitarian thing going on in Palestinian communities. But unfortunately, over time, it became an allegiance thing, and those families that were traditionally employed by the Palestinian governmental institutions, it became an allegiance thing, and the PLO till they die kind of thing. So there is this as well that would prevent a change to come from within. So we've got those 2 issues that need to be addressed. I can't begin to tell you how or what needs to be done, but this is the reality at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for the Israelis, is there anyone that you think would be a strong enough leader? Like, nobody really expected Begin that he would make peace. Is there anyone that you would expect can take over as a strong leader that the Israelis would feel comfortable making peace with and giving up land?
I think it's not a matter of a leader, actually. I think it's a matter of what the majority of the people in Israel will support. If there will be a majority of people in Israel who will basically be favorite of a two-state solution, let's say, or a peace agreement, which, by the way, according to the recent polls, if they are correct, there is a majority, a tiny majority, but there is. But if there was a more substantial majority and also a more vocal, more visible type of majority, then you would see that even the current leaders actually implement it, like Yair Lapid, in my opinion, even Gantz, which has some right-wing thoughts, but even him, I think, would actually go ahead and sign a peace agreement if he felt that the people are with him. Okay, so it's not a matter of one leader or another. I think it's a matter of actually changing public opinion. We've been through a couple of decades of very effective propaganda by the right wing, by Bibi and his people, very effective propaganda that actually made a lot of people believe that A, there is no partner, B, peace would be very dangerous, it will be just like Gaza, etc. And so a lot of people here who were very favorite of a two-state solution are now kind of on the fence or even not interested. But I think that could change. That could change with some cleanup of the toxic thoughts that we have. And I want to say, to end with a positive note, because, we are all, very disturbed with what's happening in terms of the violence of settlements and the expansion of settlements, and Palestinians are being oppressed. This is very sad on one hand. On the other hand, I want to say the positive part, which is this topic now is discussed. If you open the news, the radio, the TV, the papers, every day now, this topic is discussed heavily. And I can tell you that in the previous 4 elections that we had, this topic was hardly discussed. It was not an issue. So I think at least, in order to fix a problem, people should be aware of a problem. People should feel that there is an issue. If people don't feel the problem, if people feel, Corona is an issue, economy is an issue, things like that. And that's what, by the way, what Bibi tries to do now, to make the focus again, Iran and the economics. But if we will be, the left wing of Israel will be active enough, we'll do what we have to do, make sure that the topic of Palestinians remain a main topic, then I think we have a chance of eventually seeing a change here. So that would be my hope. Yes, Moshe.
I'd just like to add one aspect to what you said, which is almost entirely true, but it's not just a matter of affecting public opinion. It's a matter of getting the vote out, as they say in the United States, GOTV, get the vote out. Anyway, the problem, one of the problems here is that even if we do have a majority of people who believe that the conflict needs to be solved and have even a proper view of how it should happen, as long as the Arab sector, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, don't come out and vote in the numbers that the Jewish sector comes out and votes, it's difficult, because if you take them into consideration in the general opinion. They're in the same opinion as we are. Once we can actually get I'm looking forward to that one day when once we can get out a huge vote of the Palestinians in Israel, the entire map of politics in Israel can change, which can change for decades, because first of all, it has to succeed to get into government, and then it has to have the proper policies, and it has to have those policies passed. And then those policies also have to show fruit. Once that happens and people understand the value of getting into the government and making peace, as making that as our first priority, which can solve everything else because of economic reasons, when we no longer have to spend so much on defense, so-called defense, then it's very solvable. But there are historic problems with the Arab sector having a history with the Communist Party, who educated their brothers, their uncles, their parents and grandparents for free in what was the Soviet Union. They feel a certain, how would you call it? Not just a kinship, but they feel that they owe an allegiance to stay with that party or not vote at all. And that's what's holding us back, I think, in a lot of ways, unfortunately. Once we get past that hill, the entire future can look entirely different.
Agree. Diane, we didn't hear you at all. Maybe you want to sing a song for the ending.
No, I'm enjoying the discussion. Well, very interesting, but no, I'm just listening today.
I had the privilege of being in an event where Diane and Mira sang a song for us, a peace song, a couple. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I wish you could sing us a song here. So thank you, everybody, and good night, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isam.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Always a pleasure.
Oh, Isam.
Yes.
I wish you come back. You should come back. You can. You don't have to drink from the. As they say in the US, I think, from the power hose, right? You don't have to. You don't have to spend 5 hours a day on the Facebook group, but come back. Write a post once a week. Read a little bit. If it's too annoying, close it, open it the next day, it will be different. So,
Isam, do you have family in Gaza or in the West Bank?
Yes, most of my family live.
Bring them to the group.
Sure.
We want to speak with Gazans.
So I don't have immediate family in Gaza. I do have friends with whom, well, the contact is very weak because they barely have any contact with the outside world. But I do have plenty of family in Nablus, where most of my family lives. I have family in Jerusalem. My grandmother is from Jerusalem, and yeah, I'll extend an invitation to them to join these calls. Absolutely.
You really have some very good friends in this group who are waiting to see you. So please.
Absolutely, I'm very happy to catch up with all of you, and it's been a pleasure as always. I'll try to attend more of these calls. I'll think about rejoining the group at some point, more. I promise.
Well, very well. Thank you. Take care, guys. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
You.
Good night.
Night.
Bye-bye.